And so in this video, I will be analyzing the Aztec civilization and the Mayan civilization based on this book, The Aztecs, A Very Short Introduction by David Carrasco. So to start off, the Mayans were a Mesoamerican civilization, and they were a dominant indigenous society that was located in modern-day Guatemala. And for thousands of years, the Mayans established great cities and with had thriving, sophisticated culture. They lasted a longer time than the Aztecs. The earliest civilizations dated back to about 800 BC, and the fall didn't happen until about 1500 AD during the Spanish conquest, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But the Mayans had a lot of intricate architecture and a lot of a unique calendar system, and documented their history using hieroglyphic records. And yeah, so now looking at the Aztecs were a Mesoamerican civilization in the pre-Columbian era, dating back to the 14th and 16th centuries. They exist in what we now know as Central America. The Aztec capital of Techican is what we now know as Mexico City. And so Techican, Carrasco describes it as a political and economic empire. So when looking at roles, gender roles, Carrasco characterizes on page 78 that the primary role of women within the Aztec society is to be homemakers and childbearers. And he even refers to the fact that they call their children necklaces, which I found really interesting. Another interesting piece about the Aztec civilization was that how they established their gender roles. So they established it very early on in life. So about 4 days after a child is born, they go to a ceremony, a bathing and naming ceremony, where they're encouraged, the male children, to touch things like small weapons and encourage them to become warriors. And then female children, they encourage them to touch things like brooms because they wanted them to identify with the roles of like homemakers. And so when looking at religion in the Aztec civilization, the Aztecs practiced a polytheistic religion, so which means they worshiped multiple gods and had idols. And they believed that these idol gods would be pleased if they sacrificed humans. So they would actually take members of their own society and sacrifice them. They did about one sacrifice per month, along with like other things. They did human sacrifices such as children that were born with disabilities. But an interesting point that the author Carrasco brought up was that in Western culture we solely put the blame on the Aztec civilization for cannibalism and human sacrifice, even though they had multiple different contributions in areas in their culture, and there were plenty of other things that we could have learned as a Western culture from the Aztecs, and the fact that cannibalism and human sacrifice is one thing that we got is a little interesting because other cultures like the Romans, Greeks, Japanese, Egyptians, Africans also practice this as well. So that was something I found interesting. But going back to the Spanish conquest, in about 2 years, the Aztecs fell to the Spanish invaders. But the question is how. The Spanish did have greater warfare technology, including things like cannons and crossbows, but the author Carrasco points out that that's not the sole reason that the civilization fell. There was also massive indigenous armies that were also attacking the Aztecs, and the spread of European disease, along with things like a vast mass communication between the two civilizations may have also contributed as well. And so Carrasco also notes that the Aztecs didn't just fall or give politely to the Spanish. They kind of put up a fight, put up a great bloody war. But the Spanish still took control of the Aztec Empire, and after they took control, they forced upon them Catholicism among the Aztecs. And the same conversion happened when the Aztecs invaded the Mayan civilization. But in the Mayan civilization, they also burned a lot of their hieroglyphic books, hundreds of them, to the point where only 4 remain. So my overall reflection and thoughts on the Aztec and Mayan civilization with regards to the Spanish conquest, the Mayan and Aztec empires, that the reason the Spanish didn't try to adapt and learn from the Mayans because they weren't similar or like them. So they weren't the typical European and white that the Spanish were used to. And so my sort of takeaway is just imagine how what other things we could have learned, what other knowledge and topics that we could have learned from the Aztecs and the Mayans, things like architecture, astronomy, if the Spanish had attempted to adapt and not just take away their culture and learn from both of these civilizations rather than just destroying them. Thank you.